Hey everybody, it's SmallgGay. Last night the Fag Sag and I went to the picture show. We went to the highly anticipated X-Men First Class. We went to our new little theater. We like the Kips Bay AMC that we saw the Atlas Shrugged at. We have a special fondness for it. We really like the mural. We were talking deep conservative thought and examining anti-Semitism. That's the kind of nerds we are. I don't like the word wonk. I'm a nerd. I am a nerd, Harvey. We were looking at the murals there, and like Diana Ross is like one of the stars there. And Marissa Tomei is one of the stars there at the Kips Bay AMC, north of Gramercy Park on the east side of Manhattan. So we have a fondness for that theater because that's where we saw Atlas Shrugged. We'd never been there before, but we had to go there because it was one of the only theaters showing Atlas Shrugged. So it's the Atlas Shrugged Theater now. That's what we've dubbed it. So we went to see the X movie. And it was the kind of thing where I was like, do we have to go? I wanted to go, but I was like, you don't really care. I can go on my weekend, right? You don't really care. He's like, no, I really want to go. He really wanted to see it. Now, you got to understand, okay, there's a couple of differences between us. I am a long-time comic book fan, lifelong. I've been a fan of comic books since I've never not been a fan of comic book characters and superheroes my entire life. When I was a little boy, my first exposure was the Filmation Superman Batman Hour. Remember that in the 60s, for those of you who are alive? I used to watch that. I could only watch one Saturday morning cartoon. That was the one I watched. And I watched Superman, Batman, and then they'd bring in Aquaman or whatever. This was years before the Super Friends. So I was really into them, and then as I got older, I was into Marvel, and I read all the comic books, and I know all the characters, as viewers of my blog know. So I'm well-versed in the comic book universe. I kind of stopped, but you can always catch up on Wikipedia to find out what happened to everybody since you last, followed their adventures. So I've known the X-Men. My first X-Men comic book was Chris Claremont. It was the one right before John Byrne took over. So it was like a filler issue. And then I was there for the entire John Byrne run. I read all of those comic books in real time, and I can remember at the time I was like saying, everyone's into Star Wars, but the X-Men is where it's at. This is the storyline that's really happening, where they went to the Savage Land, and then they brought in the Phoenix and all of those storylines, and the future Phoenix, all that stuff. The daughter of the Phoenix. It just went on and on and on. And then Kitty Pryde and the White Queen. I still call her the White Queen. So I'd read the original storylines. I'd read the original Hellfire Club storyline, which a lot of this is based on, sort of, inspired by, used. And I know whereof I speak. The Fag Sag, on the other hand, his exposure to the X-Men is the 1990s cartoon. In the Fag Sag's X-Men universe, Jubilee is a prime character. She's one of the players. She's one of the most important characters in the X-Men. I'm sure fans are like, clutching their stomachs, their nausea. But that, he thinks Morph is a key player. Because that's his X-Men universe. So he goes to these movies and he's like, well, it was Morph. He has a very different view of it than I do. So, that said, I was watching the movie, and I thought it was like, blah, 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 you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of that TV special, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So that's how reindeer can fly. So that's why Santa makes toys. It had that prequel, like that real deliberate. So that's where they got the name Mystique. So that's why they got the Blackbird. So that's how Professor X ended up in a wheelchair. But at least I'm not bold. It's just so corny, and you're like, oh my God. And of course, this is what the people who think Paul Revere just wrote once and said the British are coming, the British are coming. This is their mentality, it's stupid. And I'm watching, I'm thinking, it's okay. you know. Um, but I started to get more and more irritated by its politics. At first, I liked the Cold War dynamic of it because it takes place in 1962. But as the Fagstag said so brilliantly, no, it took place in 1971. More on that later. As I was watching the politics, I started getting really angry because I had been glad that Marvel, I mean, I've been like with Marvel because DC, you know, Superman, like giving up his American citizenship. These comic companies are just like left-wing propaganda. They're like little Muppets, you know, and I'm just like, ew. And I was thinking, well, Marvel's better than that. I'll stick with Marvel. But this movie really made me wonder, you know. It had a real, it had a moral equivalency and a political equivalency that I found very disturbing. At first, Sebastian Shaw and the Hellfire Club are working with the Soviets. And you're thinking, oh, it's Cold War and they're on the bad guys team. But then they make the Soviets good. And they're just misunderstood. The real villains in the X-Men First Class are conservative senators who want to build arms. They're the real villains. The Cuban Missile Crisis was just a big misunderstanding. And those poor Soviets were just tricked by evil mutants who, guess what? Sebastian Shaw is a Nazi. Ipso facto, a conservative. In the leftist world, remember, Nazis are conservatives. So conservatives were really behind the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the Americans fell for the bait. They were stupid too. And then there's this whole thing at the end where it's like, American, communist, it doesn't matter. They're all evil. And Professor X, Magneto wants to kill all the American troops, and Professor X says, no, they're just following orders, making Magneto remember Nazi Germany, how they were just following orders, equating the United States with Nazi Germany. I'm appalled that none of the critics have pointed out these really nauseating political realities to this movie. It is moral equivalency out of control, and it is sympathetic to the Soviet Union. There's nothing negative about the Soviet Union portrayed in it. It's horrific. And now to 1971, the period work in this movie is the worst I've ever seen in any movie. And I kept thinking, like trying to just like groove with it, like, oh well, it's just a comic book movie. But it's not, because they want you to take these philosophical and political themes very seriously. So you can't just relax with it. And just, like, you know, like Austin Powers. Remember how Austin Powers had a few things that weren't quite accurate? It didn't really matter because it was just a goof, you know. This, it's like they keep, like, doing these glaring, I mean, I kept thinking, well, maybe this is this universe where they've already, like, Mary Quant has already discovered the miniskirt and everyone's wearing them in 1962. I mean, we've all just seen Mad Men. We all know. In 1962, they were wearing trapeze dresses and pillbox hats. It was like Lois Lane in 1962. You know, it's Jackie period. It's not what's her name? Marianne Faithfull. They look like Marianne Faithfull. All the girls in it are running around looking like Marianne Faithfull or Jane Asher. It's so unrealistic. Professor X says groovy. No one said groovy yet. That's a post-LSD word. Nobody said groovy in 1962. And the worst is when they say that the Beast is badass. My God, I mean, that badass has only been around for like 10 years. It's like a Quentin Tarantino era people. Baloney. I mean, the details were horrible. There was nothing that made you think 1962 except for Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's the only thing that made you think 1962. I really hated the way they did the Hellfire Club. In the comic books, the Hellfire Club are perverts. They are S&M freaks. And they have all these dark desires and dark pursuits. And it's threatening. It's creepy. In this movie, they're just like jet setters. And the Hellfire Club itself, in the comics, it was bizarre. It was like 17th century. It was 18th century. Very, very weird. In this movie, it's just like the Playboy Mansion. It's like they're going to the Playboy Club in Chicago. So, women, there's one character who has tattoos all over her arms and back. Like that would be okay in 1972 for a woman. Oh, in 1960, see? 1962. You keep thinking 72 because it looks like 72. Really disappointed in January Jones. So disappointed. I love her. And I love the White Queen, or Emma Frost. The White Queen is supposed to be the biggest bitch in the Marvel Universe. She is cold. She is a super diva. She's like, you know, incredible. And this one, she's like, okay, you want me to go get that? I'll go get you some ice. It was Betty Draper. It was Betty Draper and a bustier. Very disappointed in a lot of aspects of it. Now, to be fair, there were a couple of set pieces, a couple of action pieces that were quite good. They weren't knockout, though. Nothing is like Indiana Jones in this. There's nothing in it that just blows you away, okay? It's all just filler by the numbers, continuity bull. You know, so that's how Professor X met Moira McTaggart. It's just nonsense like that, geek stuff. There's two scenes: the fight of the CIA and the final fight have incredible special effects, and some of it's really amazing. And I'll give this to X-Men First Class. I've never seen flying effects that look so real. The flying characters really look like they're flying. But on the other hand, it made me think of Peter Pan, and I was thinking about how stupid it is that characters fly to begin with. Like, some things are just better drawn. I don't know. I think that this movie is overrated. And for people who are comparing it to all these other superhero movies, Thor was better. SmallgGay. Sorry, J.L. Thorpe. I know you liked this. I thought of you at the movie theater. And I think the Fag Sag liked it more than I did. But I was just kind of, especially with all the America bashing, I was kind of watching my clock. It's too bad liberals just control everything. SmallgGay, signing out.